Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Dyslexia Success Stories. And I'm going to have to pause there and say the last interview we did, the parent said to me afterwards, you've got to change the title of the name of that podcast because it's way more than dyslexia we're talking about. And that's true. And that really fits with today's episode because we're going to talk with a mom, Nancy, and talk about her son who had trouble getting his mouth to move where it needed to move to make certain sounds or to make speech more clear. And we have a name for that. It's called dyspraxia, or some people call it oral dyspraxia. And so some of you might be surprised to learn that some kids will have both conditions, dyslexia, the reading and spelling problems, and dyspraxia. And we're going to talk today about how that might be similar, might be different, and what that stuff really is. So I'm going to bring Nancy on board along with me, and we'll just start that conversation. And Nancy, I had you to the stage. Welcome to Dyslexia Success Stories.
Thank you so much. I am truly grateful for this and the beautiful results my son has had.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I should preface this to the audience. Nancy and I first met over 10 years ago almost. And so this story we're sharing today is a story that first happened 10 years ago. So we get to have the fun longitudinal conversation of, okay, what happened then? And what did we do back then? And then what's happened over the last 8-9 years since then? And granted, life is always complicated. It's never a simple story. And this is just kind of an open-ended conversation, discussion about the learning parts and the social emotional parts and the language parts and just understanding where things are at that you want to share anything that's relevant to the users or the listeners, to hear. But give us just a little bit of background about your son and what were the initial struggles. And let's just kind of go from that first picture of where the struggles were and what were you wondering or what were you thinking was going on?
Well, and I don't know if other moms can relate to this, but usually when something is going on with a kid, and I have 4, he's the baby. He's 15 now. Mm-hmm. So the story really goes back to about 15 years ago. And even before, it goes back to the dad's generation. Even. Okay. This is a long story.
That's what we call, in Trinidad, they don't have apple trees. So they say the mango does not fall far from the tree.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, I thought it was me. I thought I had the problem because he was my 4th child. Okay. And we were having a hardship in the family. And I also was disabled for the first 2 years of his life. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which we figured out what it was. And I'm fully healthy. I ride a jet ski and I hike and so I don't have that. Good. But trying to raise 4 kids when you are disabled, I couldn't even stand on my feet. I was so exhausted. I had other women come in and help me in the evening for the whole bath and bedtime routine. So the thing with my little one was I didn't understand what he was saying. Okay. I could not, there was not once I understood a syllable, a hand gesture, a word. And I'm saying all the way up until 3. Wow. And his sister, the middle, 2 girls, 2 boys. Mm-hmm. The younger sister is a lot like him. Mm-hmm. So we always joke, we got a mini me of my husband and a mini me of me. And this one is the mini me male version of my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. So I just would look at, he actually came up with all of the nicknames in our family because of the speech impediment. Right. So Cynthia became Tia, Natalie became Nanny, and Josiah became Jojo. And we are, these kids are grown adults and we still use these adorable nicknames based on my youngest son's lack of ability to speak. So first of all, I just want to say to any mom who's listening, I thought it was me. I didn't believe there was anything wrong with my kid.
And expand on that. You thought maybe you hadn't done something or done enough?
I'm tired. I'm worn out. Gotcha. The adult children are actually still bitter and resentful of me because I caved to my youngest son's tantrums. Mm-hmm. Right. I didn't understand what he was saying. So his frustration level was really high. So we had a lot more behavioral issues than I did because all the other kids did baby sign language. I was communicating at 10 months and debating at 10 months old.
Wow.
So you can see what a contrast it is in, the functionality of my other children.
And that's an interesting point. Did he do the sign language or you weren't available to do the sign language because you were just disabled at that time?
those are the things I could understand.
Okay,
I
so
could
he's a good
understand
son.
salt. I could understand water. I could understand yes. I could understand no.
Well, and here's why I ask, because right here in the left side of the brain is the auditory processor, and it's the early speech control, and your speech movement system is up here, but the real mouth control is right up here above it. So commonly, and above the mouth control is the fingers. So if
Yeah.
there's difficulty moving the mouth, there's a much higher likelihood there's going to be trouble moving the fingers. So
Mm.
some kids actually can't learn sign language and are dyspraxic and are dyslexic, which means an even more severe situation. So it's helpful to know in the realm of mild, moderate, or severe, he sounds pretty moderate, but not completely severe because he actually had finger control, but it was really more affecting his ability to move his mouth to actually produce the articulations.
Yeah, and I think the finger control would be limited. He
Right,
loved
because it's more like hand
basketball.
gripping. This is the milk symbol, it's the eat symbol, so it's more of a hand gesture as
Right,
opposed to doing finger spelling and things like
correct.
that. That would probably not be present.
No, and I only did about 10 words.
Okay.
I just needed to know, "Do you need help? Are you
Yeah,
done? You
yeah,
want more?" Like, I
yep,
just needed a few basic words. So
right,
I could understand the basics, but I couldn't understand the nuance of what he really wanted.
right.
And for whatever reason, his sister has and she still does, she's such a caring soul. She had high nurturing and attunement. So
Hmm,
I would just look at her and say, "Natalie, what does he want?" Like,
yeah,
and
see,
she is
figure it
5
out.
years older. So she was 6 years old interpreting for my son, and it's still a lot like that. They're very close.
Well, and so it was more of the difficulty of his speech was it just kind of mushy and soft and muddled, or just you couldn't even make out what word he was saying?
I did not know what word he was saying.
And
Had
and let
no
me
idea.
let me backtrack one thing for you because I have a patient that we helped when he was 45, and this would be back in the 1980s. And so he was a young child, back in I guess, the 50s, right? And so he had such severe speech that his parents could barely understand him. They got him assessed at age 5 or 6, and the parents were told that he was mentally incompetent or mentally disabled, and they should just put him in an institution because they equated speaking skills with IQ. Today we know that's not inaccurate. There's not a parallel one to one. There's not a direct linear, from IQ to speech. These are separate systems. And thankfully, his parents didn't listen to the professionals of that day because we tested his IQ when he was 45 and his
Mm,
IQ was 125, which is like above the 90th percentile. So think about being a high IQ kid, which we believe your son is as well, and you can't get your mouth to say the things that you have in your mind.
yep,
So his frustration level is high. Your frustration level is high because you're trying to figure this out. As you said, the older siblings are frustrated because you're always caving into him because he's always getting upset and he just acts out because he can't get the words out. And 5 gestures or even 10 gestures is just not enough gestures to clearly communicate needs and wants and concerns.
yep. That's exactly how it went, and I, again, took the blame, if you will, until I met you at the conference. We were both speaking at an early childhood education conference.
The NACE conference, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I saw your and that I mean, he's one of the reasons that I invested 10 years in a child discipline program so I could be skilled because I thought it was, my fault, my problem. I
mm,
haven't figured out enough yet.
yeah,
Um, and so when I heard you speaking, and especially the correlation between that and suicide and that and crime,
yeah.
that just melted my heart, and I was like, "This is my son." I could see everything that you were discussing academically, if you will, or scientifically.
Mhm,
That part didn't necessarily sink in. I have a master's in education, I
mhm.
have a decent IQ, so it's not like I'm dumb, but
No,
the language is just not mine either. But I got it. I was like, "Wow, he is describing my son. This is the problem my son has," when you were saying how they look like they're keeping up in the classroom with other people.
right.
He's a wonderful, playmate,
Mhm,
classmate,
mhm,
kid, human, really smart when he solves problems and the
mhm.
thinking. He is really bright.
Yep, very intelligent.
Yep. But the way the teachers were talking to me,
Yeah.
ugh, I was like, I know, I know, I don't know how to fix this. They're like,
Right.
well, he's got to do this and he's got to do this. And I'm like, not my kid, not
Yeah.
this one. You
And
can
you're,
ask.
and as a parent, you're like, and I'm hoping you know how to do the things to do to help him be able to do that. And it's not because you're not reading to him. It's not because nobody speaks to him at home. And so this is what always puzzles me is we have all these nonprofits getting parents to read books to kids. And like, that's great for oral language, but reading books to kids does not teach kids how to read. That's
Mhm.
not how the brain learns to read. That's how the brain learns oral vocabulary, spoken vocabulary. And it's also a bonding and connect. So it's not a bad thing, but we have all these nonprofits that think if we just give kids more books and hire more tutors to read to them and encourage more parents to read to them, that will fix the reading problems, which then gives parents guilt to think, did I not read enough to my kid? I mean, I think I read a lot to my kid. And there's now data about the current generation doesn't like reading to their kids. They don't
Mhm.
find it enjoyable, many of them report. And it's just kind of dry and boring. They'd rather show them a video, and so the point is that many parents start to feel like they've not done something right and they've not given the child some kind of proper learning experience. And you're hoping the school has the knowledge. But one thing that most parents don't understand, and most schools don't even understand, is schools are not developmental diagnostic centers, and schools are not developmental treatment centers. They don't have expertise in how the brain builds sensory motor skills or how the brain builds spoken language skills. And even written language skills is not part of their expertise. It's part of the curriculum, and they know how to deliver their curriculum. And we're getting better. Teachers are getting more knowledge about the quote, the science of reading, which is kind of like a list of ingredients of what you might use in a reading program, but it's devoid of, or they don't give them the recipe, which is just idiotic. It just makes no sense. I'm going to give you the ingredients, but you go figure out the recipe. Like that has a very low chance of success.
So the irony of this, and one of the reasons I was also speaking at that conference, is I developed a playgroup curriculum for
Okay.
0 to 4
Nice.
that teaches pair bonding, right,
Mhm.
between the mother and the child, how to reduce aggravation, or tantrums
Right.
with the child, behavioral issues by
Right.
50%,
Yeah.
and baby sign language, which
Right.
is shown to increase IQ on average of 12 points,
Mhm.
increase academics and standardized tests later on,
Right.
and typically where language is advanced a year or 2.
Right. And decrease frustration, decrease tantrums because the kid can actually communicate with you.
Yes. So this is the funny, I even had a grant from the March of Dimes, and I built this across a 100-mile long county. So it's not like I even myself did early intervention for other families on birth defects,
Okay.
on, some of the language, but I'm also not skilled at what you understand. So I even though I had this for other parents and I could help other families, I couldn't see what was happening in my own son because I just didn't know what the problem was.
Right.
And I used every skill that I have, which, out of 99 moms, how
Right.
many of them wrote a playgroup curriculum?
Yeah. Not many. No.
No.
Yeah.
So I really wish every educator understood this. Somebody could have helped us. We did homeschool, and
Mhm.
I did teach my other children to read, to do all the things.
Mhm.
The 2 of the children are a bit like me, where we have really strong left brains,
Mhm.
and we're weak on the right side, which is
Lots of language skills, maybe not so great in math, maybe not so great in conceptual imagery types of things, or directions, or map geography. Okay.
yeah, but also the break, right? When we get frustrated, there's a break. So I was familiar with brain assessment,
Mhm.
and I could see clearly one of my kids was developmentally delayed about 4 years.
Okay.
So he looked like this age, but his ability was that age.
Mhm.
Um, the behavioral, like, I did dig everywhere I could dig, and I did apply everything I thought I
Mhm.
could find. But that day I heard you speak, I just felt like, I don't know, the gates of heaven just opened and there was hope.
Good.
That's I was like, finally somebody is gonna understand my son and knows something that I don't know yet.
And to give the audience some background piece of this, my expertise as a neuropsychologist is in child development. It's in adolescence, neuropsychology of adolescence. It's neuropsychology of adults. It's neuropsychology of brain trauma rehab and neuropsychology of fMRI brain imaging. So I've extensively trained across all those areas. And in the neuro rehab, that means working with people post brain injury. And we learned things by doing brain injury that taught us what to do earlier for the developmental kids. And we learned things by doing the developmental research that gave us some ideas of what else we might be doing different for the older folks who had brain injuries. So these may not sound complementary, but they are. They're just two different ways to look at a system of one that's not developing well and one that got broken because of the brain injury, but both need to be rebuilt.
Okay, I'm glad that you presented it this way because I probably did not tell you about this because it just, again, didn't occur to me.
Sure.
Call Dr. Conway. So before we knew what COVID was,
right,
late 19, my son's behavior started to change. And he's an honest kid. He'll tell you, what's going on. But I don't know why I was misjudging him. We were out of state and we were going to an event and drool was coming out of his mouth and his hands were just trembling a little bit. And we went to this, and I was telling him, if you're sick, we can just stay home. If you need to act like this, I got some attitude about it, which, God forgive me. I don't know why. And then we got to the museum and they just had to put a nut and a bolt and he couldn't line it up. It was jiggering like this. And I was thinking he's not faking this. So I called the dad because I was traveling without him. And I called the dad and I said, hey, I'm really worried. We're out of state. I think something's happening. Do you want me to go over to the children's hospital? But then I don't know how long I'm here and I'm out of state and you're not here. And, he's like, no, get him home. Let's see what happens. So we cut our trip a little short. No alert, no alarm. Just, thank you for the stay. We're going to go home now. We got home. And he was with the dad. I forget what I was doing. He was unable to eat. He almost choked on soft egg.
Wow.
So that was, of course, very scary.
Yeah.
And he was starting to like this. So he got him to the hospital. They immediately rushed him to the children's hospital. They couldn't identify what it was. They ruled out infection.
Right.
Ironically,
encephalitis or anything, meningitis,
But this was New Year's Day, and the neurologist said, "I have never seen this before, and I have 4 children exactly like this." Now, 3 months later, the rest of the world knew what COVID was.
Right.
COVID pre-understanding what COVID was, and COVID in children presented. I think it looked like cerebral palsy or something.
Right.
At the time, I was literally praying in the hospital for my son. I was like, God, is this permanent? Is my son's brain damaged now? Because he could barely talk.
Yeah.
He could just move like this. He was alert and he was aware. And the only diagnosis they gave us was swelling of the brain unidentified, acute swelling of the brain unidentified.
And the reason being is they know that pressure on the brain puts compression on it and interrupts brain firing, brain communication, and can present with behavioral changes. So that would make sense as why I think that it must be this, without doing any more invasive procedures to go really measure the pressure in the brain. That would be one logical assumption.
Yep. Mushy food and steroids. That's what we did.
Wow.
And this is 25. So 5 years ago, he did gain all that steroid weight. Right. And then, so now he's a heavy kid at school getting teased.
Yeah.
And, I have another doctor that looks at the function of the heart and the blood flow, which is definitely impacted. So he looks like a normal kid on the outside, but on the inside, his heart and blood functions like a 65-year-old. I think it's maybe what they call long COVID now.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm curious now talking to you because he's stopped enjoying academics.
Yeah.
He loves talking to I say professor because it's a law professor. He loves that class and he loves like the ideas and he's like, Mom, about this, what they did about that. He's digging the content.
Yeah.
He is not engaged in anything with paper, pencil.
The focus required to study. But when it's live interactive, someone's there face to face, and there's a reaction, there's emotional connection, there's inquisitive conversation back and forth. That keeps them alert, keeps them engaged, and keeps them processing information. And so part of what you might be describing is there's been a decrease in attentional focus and ability to sustain attention. Because to do study by yourself, you've got to sustain the attention. It's not as rewarding. There's nobody else there engaging you. There's nothing that really is as intriguing. You can't ask anybody questions. And you just need to read and comprehend and read. But it has a much higher demand for sustained attention.
Yeah.
So the next step would be doing some testing with either a neuropsychologist or someone who's very specialized in attention, and looking at those systems and looking how they're working. Now, the same kind of symptoms happen when someone has concussion, especially if it's repeated concussion. They start to lose attention focus. They start to have trouble with short-term memory. And believe it or not, there's a whole concussion protocol to try to help reset the brain. But there's also using proprioceptive sensory input in a sensory integration gym with a properly trained and certified sensory integration OT. Then they actually can begin to rebuild some of that focus ability with tactile, proprioceptive, and vestibular inputs. And so you're going back to the core neurology of what we think built attention and focus skills to begin with. And that's a lot of very well-structured, well-designed, but high-intensity, high-frequency occupational therapy. And so one thing we didn't get to do with your son when we were working on his verbal or oral dyspraxia, the motor control, and also just working on his dyslexia, the reading struggles, was we didn't have access to an OT gym because you weren't at my medical clinics, the Morris Center. We were doing all this work with your son online. What are your recollections of how he felt about doing the online sessions in the beginning? And I read back, because we still have all the records, I read back through some of the earlier sessions. They're like, yeah, not a great session. Attention was minimal. Mom was there for the first 10 minutes. It's going great. Mom left and attention was abysmal. Dad was there for the first 30 minutes. We had more engagement. Dad left and attention was abysmal. And there's all because he found this stuff hard and difficult to do, even though we were just teaching him very simple, exploratory, oral motor things, which for him were not simple.
Yeah. So also just place this in context of where we were as a family, right? He was 6, so I'd already been homeless a few times with the kids, and as a result, wasn't very happy in my marriage and left.
Yeah.
So, this kid at 6 has lived in how many places, and his parents are divorced.
Okay.
And so he had a rough way about it. This was not an easy year. And the year that I met you, I got him into a program based on classical conversations, which is really high-end intellectual capacity of content. So they're the kindergartners were reading like first grade level, second grade. By the end of kindergarten, they were at second grade level. Wow. And here's my kindergartner that's not even on par. Yeah. And those were the teachers. I was like, you can ask that of my other kid all day long. This one, not, I'm just not doing it. Yeah. I don't care what you say to me. You can't make me do this. I'm not going to torture my child.
Right. Because he couldn't do it.
No.
So it's like, you can't keep asking the child to do a task that's up here when his skill level is down here. That's not learning. That's not going to change it. If you don't meet the child where they're at and figure out where their skills are functioning, and you can engage in a functional level of activity and practice, then you can systematically build up. But you can't build a, quote, house from the second story up and hope the foundation's okay. You need to be sure the foundation's okay, the first story is framed properly, it's level. All that will affect everything above the first story. And the brain's the same way.
Yeah. So imagine I'm a single mom. I'm concerned about paying my bills every month. And I was waking up at 4 a.m. to drive an hour commute. I was working from home a bit, dropping the boys off at school, running an hour to commute. They were gracious enough to let me leave at 2:30, knowing I had already put in a few hours from 4 a.m. So I could leave downtown at 2:30. I had to be in Carline by 3:30. And I don't know what time we had to be online with you, but like 4, 5, 6, something like that. But imagine I'm already at hour 14 of my life.
Yeah. Just stressful.
Yeah.
And exhausting.
But also think about him, because he's not immune to what is happening and with the rest of us. And he's tired. He's had a whole day of like not feeling good enough for the other kids can do. And this was way before the brain injury. So he was thin and athletic and, highly capable of all the social things boys do.
Mm-hmm.
But the academic things that girls could do is like, he didn't square up that way. So he had his own emotional load to come home to. So it was a little bit, and just a 6-year-old sitting at a computer after a day of school, like that's just,
I just looked it up. Your first session started at 4 p.m. So then he's on the computer from 4 o'clock to 4:45. Now, the good news is when you're doing these nowprograms.com or this Now Foundations program, it's interactive. So it's not memorization. It's not just somebody talking to you. It's a guy or a girl who loves what they're doing. He's been highly trained to engage you in these sensory activities that are part visual, part acoustic, part oral tactile, part oral kinesthetic, and part cognitive of thinking of what your mouth is doing when you say "buh." Is your lips popping or your lips staying together? So it's got a degree of creative engagement, decision-making, problem solving, and then they try to gamify it as well. And you have to meet the 6-year-old where they're at, not only cognitively, but also at the motor skill level and the perceptual level. So that's why we do extensive training with the instructors, because they've got to be able to meet a 6-year-old, a 16-year-old. We've had people as old as 74 online, Nancy. A 74-year-old who still couldn't spell, and he wanted to change those skills. And nowprograms.com has the programs that are capable of doing that. So, but the instructors have to be able to meet the student where they're at.
And listen, every instructor we worked with, we had a favorite.
Yes, Mr. Michael was the favorite.
We loved Michael.
Yeah.
I don't know why. My son just loved him. He did. And I watched, Michael be patient and persistent, but also not let my son pull the tricks he would normally pull with us.
We had to do the work. We were not letting him out of the work, but they would tell him, look, we're a team, we're working together. So I might ask you a question. If you struggle with it, no problems. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to know the answers. Just tell me what you're thinking. What do you see with your eyes? What do you hear with your ear? What do you feel with your mouth, teeth, or tongue? What do you think's going on? And it's engaged in a Socratic discovery-based learning platform. So, and he's 6, but he still was doing it.
He did. We kept up with the sessions as the best we can. I do remember a couple of them where I was driving and had the laptop on the Wi-Fi.
There are notes about they're in the McDonald's parking lot for this session. They're at a baseball game, so we're in the auditorium. Sound quality wasn't the best, but kudos to you guys for making the effort to not miss a session. Now, is it always going to be the perfect environment? No, but Nancy, neither is school. School's not always the perfect environment either. So then we're essentially just training him to function even when the environment's not perfect, and that's what school is going to be like too. So it's perfectly fine that happens because that's the real world. And the team knows that, staff knows that. I think even one time there wasn't going to be a computer, there was going to be an iPad. And the iPad's a lot harder to work with because you can't do double screens, whatever. And the team were like, that's all right, we'll get as much done as we can using the iPad. And then that's that can figure it out approach of the instructors from nowprograms.com.
And they really, I'm really grateful for the grace to get us through it, because that's single mom, transferring, kids at transfer times, 4 of them, everybody doing a different activity. Like, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And you worked with us really in an incredible way. And
it's important. Elijah's learning is important. We have to help your son really build those skills, get that skill, get that as strong as possible. And like you said early on, you heard me talk at that conference, and the conference was about how does the brain typically develop? Well, my part of the conference, let me talk about my talk at the conference about how does the brain develop language skills? What are the lower level sensory motor skills that build up to the speaking skills, that build up to the phonological awareness skills, that build up to the reading skills? So we went all the way down to the oral motor skills, but we also talked about what happens as a high risk if we don't do it. If you're 9 years old and don't learn how to read and spell, you're 40% more likely to be on welfare and in jail or in prison at some point in time. So we have to get these skills on there. And what you alluded to earlier about the suicide, that was in reference to dyslexia. We know that 2 different studies showed that 89% of teen suicide notes have the same spelling mistakes as kids with dyslexia. Doesn't mean all those teens had dyslexia, but there's an association that looks very much like it that could have been a contributing factor to their low self-esteem, the emotional trauma, and the really poor choice that no parent ever wants to experience, and we hope no child does, which is, death by suicide. And so you understood all of that and saw the big picture of where your son could be going and what could we do about it. But you also saw that when I gave a developmental science perspective of the number one predictor of reading skills is a phoneme task that parents can do with your kid at home. If your kid is 4 or 5 years old, this is for all the viewers, we have now and in the future, because this is videotaped, and it'll be available on the YouTube channel, the LinkedIn platform, all the platforms. So for folks who watch it later, know that all you have to do is say the word cat and ask your child to say cat back to you. Then ask them to change it. Now say cat and don't say the k sound, that very first sound, take it away. Or you tell the child to say flame. The child says flame. Say, now say flame, don't say oh. And the child should just say fame. You say, now say cup. Say cup, but don't say the k sound. And the child should just say up. So that take a sound away activity at age 4 and 5 is the number one predictor of your reading and spelling skills. And it has to do with your awareness of the mouth and the acoustics and the visual. This whole system has to be working together. And if it's not working together at age 4 and 5, phonics are not going to help you, because these are skills that have to be strengthened before phonics.
Yeah, I want to touch on the suicide piece, because it's making sense. I didn't tie in the brain injury experience. But, about 2 years after that, he did have suicidal ideation, and my mother was dying at the time. Like, there was a lot also shifting in the family again. But he was also in that heavier set stage, prepubescent, like the whole, how do I fit in with these cool kids who are athletic? Remember how his heart functions now? His heart functions like an old man, even though he's in this young man's body that other people expect to see perform like that.
Yeah.
And then I did not consider how that swelling would re-impact his language and reading. Even though I could see his mouth struggling, it still didn't tie in. So I'm thankful that, obviously it wasn't complete. But no, yeah.
But important to understand how those systems all work together, how they build together. But go ahead.
The other thing I remembered from the conference that was like, okay, I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
Then you were talking about
right afterwards, right? I'm pretty sure you're like first in line after our talk ended.
And I was probably elbowing people. Yeah. There was a part about look at the kids in the lunchroom.
Yes.
Can you restate that? Because that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this man's seen my child.
What I'll say to parents is, we know that the more a child knows how their mouth is moving, the easier it is to learn the sounds of the language. And we know from laser eye tracking study, a great study done by Dr. Lukowitz, I think it's back in 2012, where he had the infant face-to-face with mom. And mom's talking to the infant, and they used a laser eye tracker to tell where the pupils were looking when the infant was face-to-face with mom. And mom's saying, hi, Bobby, la, la, la. And what they found was from 2 months to 6 months of age, all the kids are looking up here. It's like facial recognition. Who is this? And they're really looking at your eyes. And by 8 months of age, the majority of kids are right here watching your mouth move. They're trying to see what your mouth is doing, how the lips are moving. And most kids start babbling around 8 months of age. But about 20 or 30% of kids don't look at your mouth. So they're getting sound just by acoustics only. When you say free, 3, they're like, wait, did you say the number? Or it's not going to cost me anything, because you couldn't see their mouth. But when you see free and 3, like, oh, that's the number. It was the second one. The first one was I don't have to pay for it. And so your brain needs the visual to help the acoustic. And so those things are supposed to be wiring together. So what I say in the conferences is you want to find the kids who are higher risk for poor phonological skills, poor ability to sound out words, poor ability to learn their letters and sounds, is you go watch them eat lunch. And the kids who are wearing food all over their face and jello's shoved up their nose and, pudding's hanging off their lip or something like that, and they don't, quote, feel it, they're telling you they have decreased sensory awareness around the mouth. And the most simple way to make that concrete to parents is to say, nobody questions whether some kids have a low pain threshold and other kids have a high pain threshold. They get that. You have some kids, they have a little tiny cut and they're screaming like they broke their leg. And the parent comes running in the room thinking there's like going to be blood everywhere. And the kid has a paper cut. You're like, what happened? Your other child cuts themselves. They drip blood on the furniture and the carpet, and they have no idea they've cut themselves. You're like, how did you not know? You've cut your finger. Like, I didn't know. I didn't feel it. So that same difference in pain thresholds can exist in awareness of what the teeth, tongue, and lips are doing. And so that same difference can also affect the tactile sensitivity of the skin. Can it feel jello hanging off your lip or ketchup stuck on part of your nose or whatnot? And many people who are higher risk don't have that sensory system happening here. And then they're going to struggle to learn their B's and D's because they're not noticing that when I say ba, my lips come together and pop apart. A whole different part of the mouth than when I say da, da. Now my tongue's going up and tapping. And they're so unaware what their mouth is doing, they're just trying to memorize the B, memorize the D. And people are giving all kinds of strategies, the hooks for this and this. And they're making up kinds of songs and they're doing all kinds of memorization strategies. But if we just show them and train them to be more aware of how they feel their mouth, that immediately removes the B and D confusion because now they know, oh yeah, that was the one where my lips pop. Oh, that one where it's got the stick last and the bubble parts first, that's the D, that's where my tongue goes up and taps. You've now added concrete sensory information to that phonological information.
That is what happened over time, watching him work and play and match at the games and have success. He definitely got that. And of course, the eating improved, which was a delight.
And we didn't even do OT, but we just did a lot of work around the mouth to learn how the mouth moves. We would learn things like lip poppers and tongue tappers and tongue scrapers. And we did them through a very systematic approach, but with a lot of motor practice, which is why this is not a dyspraxia treatment program. And we're not using a speech pathologist, so it's not speech therapy. It's an educational program that happens to do a lot of focus on mouth movements, motor awareness, motor planning, motor execution. So by secondary chance, it can also change articulation's clarity. Although it's not an articulation program. It's not marketed that way. We don't sell it that way. But that's just how the program is structured to build a better foundation for phonological awareness and make stronger decoding skills to sound out words when reading and to sound out words when spelling. So you're saying you saw his motor control getting better?
Yeah, and it is still better. Say it again.
How could you tell when he was young, when he was 6, 7? What were the more clear symptoms to you about these getting better control of his mouth?
Okay, my mother was OCD. If I had eaten at the table the way my children eat at the table, I would have been beaten, literally.
Yeah.
So, it's the formative. I've struggled watching my children eat just anyway.
Right.
And then this one is a complete mess. I don't think I took him home to eat in front of my mother, like barely ever.
Right.
I think barely ever, because she just was old school and
understand.
would not have understood.
Yeah.
And I didn't even understand. I was just like, Bubba, what, clean it up. Look at your hands, try again. Close your mouth when you chew. Close your mouth when you chew. Close your mouth when you chew.
Yeah.
Really 500 times in a meal. And, there's that part of the parenting, like, oh, they're not listening to me. But I could tell just something was different because he was like, oh, these, none of my kids are really like, they don't do it because they don't want to do it.
Right.
There's something else going on with
a struggle there. Yeah.
Yeah. And with him especially, I was like, oh, this one's a messy one. Like, we're not taking you home to mom.
And here's another interesting question that we didn't talk about before 10 plus years ago. How easy was it for him to learn how to use utensils, spoon, fork, and knife?
No.
Yeah, and here's why. Do you understand why now today, why it would be hard for him to learn how to use utensils? It's a very precision, fine motor skill. And so just like we didn't do alphabet letters with sign language, we just did gestures like, more and eat that are more gestural movement of the whole limb and arm. When you use utensils, it requires more fine motor skill, a precision of fine motor, especially bilateral skills to cut, use a fork to stab and a knife to cut meat. And so many kids who are at risk for motor deficits are showing struggles to use utensils, and parents are appalled because the kid wants to eat with their hand. And they want to grab the food with their hand and shove it in the mouth because that's a easier, less precise, more gross motor kind of movement.
Yeah, which in my family of origin, those were table manners, important table manners, not related to, brain function or not.
Right. You're either willfully choosing to make bad choices and eat with your hands, or you're choosing to use the utensils like I told you to.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't that way with him. So in the homeschooling bit, we used a lot of manipulatives for math.
Right.
And even like learning the letters, maybe with sand or rice, and he always loved tactile experiences. He loved, we called it scooping. I would take dry beans and keep them in buckets, and he could scoop and stir. He loved those bigger movements.
Nice.
Because he could see the beans and everything moving around. We even kept a kiddie pool with dry rice, and he could just sit in the kiddie pool with cars and shovels and
explore it and play with it and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's powerful. So how did school go in the early years? What was the elementary school experience like for him? Did it change?
Well, after the public school, he ended up switching to private school and living with his dad more. So it's a smaller environment. He still was able to keep an AB average, a BC average. He's still, and it's sad because the other siblings are so academically inclined.
Yeah.
That, that's another part of his self-worth is watching the siblings do things that he just doesn't do.
Right.
So on paper, it's okay. Right. Now that he's in high school, it's not okay. And it was turning into behavioral issues in the private school. So recently, again, we just moved him to public school where he said it would be better. But now that I'm talking this out with you, I'm really realizing how I could have done better for him in this last semester. He needed the support. I was caregiving for my father until his final days. So I was not hands-on with him this semester. I was living in another town, and I don't want him to feel bad about the academic performance this semester. But after talking it out with you, I can see how that brain swelling impacted it, and the support and the attention to work at it together. Because when he sits down to do homework with me, it goes really well, and we enjoy talking about all the topics. But I think it's what you're explaining to me now is that sustained attention. Right. So I think he's smart enough, right? And it's just like, I still remember this part of your conversation from that conference is, the girls slide by because they look like they pay attention. They
don't want to stand out. They'll try to hide their deficits. If people are flipping pages of the book, they're going to flip pages of the book, even though they're not.
I think that's how he's gotten along all these years. But now he's in a bigger school, bigger program, and you have to go online and find the document and follow the instructions and turn it in and remember where that paperwork is the next day. And then also ask for the one that you missed 2 days ago. There's so many moving parts. I think the sustained attention now is really catching up with him.
Right. And the demand is higher now.
Yeah.
So I looked back at his records and we measured some of his skills back when he was 6. He actually couldn't do the test on phonological awareness. It required you to be able to count blocks and order of blocks and concepts of first and last. And he didn't have those concepts, couldn't count the blocks, couldn't organize the blocks, and couldn't do the pre-testing of phonological awareness. It took us around 11 months. We did 1 session a day, 5 days a week, because high intensity, high frequency drives new wiring on the brain, especially the left side language cortex, getting more and more connections, more and more efficiency of processing. And we took him up to 4 sound words, like a consonant, a vowel, consonant. And we took him up to 2-syllable words in his phonological processing. And then we trained that level for reading and spelling words as well. So he could more easily sound out 1- and 2-syllable words to read and more easily sound out 1- and 2-syllable words to spell. And then at the end of the about 200 sessions, we then repeated the phonological processing testing. And Nancy, not only could he do the test now, but he scored at the 65th percentile. So in basically like about 11 months, we took a kid that had no phonological processing, which most everyone today knows, phonological awareness is the number one predictor of your reading skills. And he's now at the 65th percentile, which is a lot closer to what we believed then was his true IQ. And so that's what then started that ball rolling. But it also carried over to changing those oral dyspraxia, because the intervention program, that Now Foundations program, it has a developmental name. Its full name is Now Foundations for Speech, Language, Reading, and Spelling. That's a developmental hierarchy. Speech processing first, then comes semantics and language processing second, then comes reading skills, then comes spelling skills. So we took it through that whole hierarchy, but all the way through the whole program, it has a heavy focus on what's your mouth doing? What do you hear coming out of your mouth? What do you see your mouth doing? What do you feel your mouth doing? So it's multisensory, but it's what we call neurodevelopmental multisensory. It's the senses we think the brain uses for anybody who has strong phonological awareness. In contrast, phonics programs use the term multisensory, but they're multisensory memorization strategies to memorize phonics rules, to memorize syllable structures, to memorize, how to break words up into syllables, to memorize how to put chunks together to try to read a word. So it's very multisensory memorization as opposed to multisensory processing of sensory and motor information in a model that we think is developmental, which means everybody's brain has to have this kind of processing to build those phonological skills as strong as possible. And he did it.
That truly is a miracle. Some other mom might not be happy with 65%, but I have to tell you, that's a miracle in my world.
No, but it's 65th percentiles, not 65%. It's on that bell-shaped curve, which means it's high average. So he went from
100. It's not 99.
No, yeah.
For us type A's, 65 might not be impressive, is what I'm trying to say.
We only could go to his IQ level. So if his IQ is like high average, that's where we can get the processing skill to. If his IQ is 90th percentile, then we would aim to get the training to 90th percentile. But you also would say that then we'd actually have to finish the program. He didn't finish the program because he was 6. We just took him to what was a developmentally appropriate level of function.
Yes.
And then did no more intervention with him after that, because he should have had enough of the foundational skills to benefit from the school's instructional model.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I'm saying. That number might not impress somebody else, but I'm telling you, that's a miracle in my world, because when he went to the next school, he was capable. Nice. And it wasn't the continual drain of, I'm not good enough, I can't do what the other kids can do. He actually came home with papers, complete, messy handwriting still.
Yep.
Still the spelling, I don't challenge him on it.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that came to mind too when you talked about speech being the foundation, and that you see this in multiple generations. When I heard that in your conference, I was like, that's weird, because the rest of us are highly functioning academically. We have master's degrees, we're teachers, like we read, we taught kids to read, like we're high functioning. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense. And then later I remembered my ex-husband was given 7 years of speech therapy as a child.
That's a lot of speech therapy.
And they were from a state that has a very unique accent. And so I thought, wow, that mom was really concerned about getting that accent out. That's what my thought was at the time. And I never got to meet the grandmother. Well, my husband at the time, his mother, I never got to meet her, but I was always grateful for her. Because my husband was the only one who got out of his state and got a college degree. And I do believe, even though it wasn't to your level, now that you've explained to me and I see what an impact it's had, I can only imagine the frustration, the dad must have been feeling as a kid too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's ties into one final point as we try to wrap up this great conversation. I really thank you for the time here, is I think it's going to be really powerful for the audience to hear what happened on your son's last session. Because it wasn't that it just changed his phonological awareness, and it changed, and he actually now could read, because he couldn't read at all before as a 6-year-old. He now could spell. He didn't know his letters and sounds reliably, but now he did. And so not only did we give him those skills, but what was the emotional impact for your son? I think the last day caught you by surprise.
Yeah, it really did, because we felt like, better than kindergarten graduation even then.
Yeah.
We were super excited for this milestone because he could do, like, my firstborn literally was reading at 2. We
Wow.
were tacking letters and what's this word and that word and writing things, and other people would look at me and say, "How old is she?" She was literally speaking in paragraphs. And they were like, "How old is she?" And I'm like, "She's 2." And they're like, "That's not normal." And I'm like, "I don't know. It's my first kid. What's normal?" Right? So this is the shadow that all the other children have grown up under, is this super highly intellectual, talented, beautiful person. And so to us, this was like a huge milestone. Now he can do what his siblings can do. He can
And
read.
like you said, speech got better, more clarity of speech. Yeah, reading it's there.
Yeah, so we were ready to celebrate. His sister made him a cake. I don't
Wow.
remember if we had hats or not. We might have, because I probably would have had balloons or something, because it's this
Big
exciting.
event.
And we wanted to honor, like, he did it. He showed up. He did the work he was
11
supposed to
months
do.
of hard work
Yes.
every day, 5 days a week for 11 months. As a 6-year-old, that's not a small amount of commitment.
No, it's huge. So we wanted to celebrate, and he was so proud with Michael on the phone, and we thought it was all great. He was saying goodbye to Michael and thank you to Michael, and um, as soon as we shut the laptop down, he started crying. His little lip quivered and he melted down. I was like, I thought he was going to walk away and be so happy that it was over and that he got this milestone. No, and he is a sweet kid. So I
Yeah.
just got to hold him for a long time. Like
Your
I said,
note to us back then said you had to console him for 10 minutes. He
yeah,
cried for 10 minutes. But why?
yeah.
Why was he crying?
I think he really formed a great bond. Like, Michael really had to push through with him
Mm-hmm.
and develop that trust and find what would motivate him and continue to connect it. And it was a part of a routine. It was somebody who showed him love. It was somebody who honored him in an academic setting, which he never got it from somewhere at school. Even, they still wanted me, like, "Okay, Miss Lucas, he should be here now." And I'm like, "Not my kid. You don't know what we've gone through." Which I did try to get them to see what you do, but, and then we got him calm a little bit, and so the sister brought out the cake, and he melted down again. Like, he was just so emotional. Um, I I think it's just a testament to the relief. Maybe at 6, he didn't have the conscientiousness of it,
Right.
but he did recognize that this was helping him. He
Right.
did recognize that help, and to have that help leave, I think, was really hard for him.
And I think one of the notes you wrote back in 2016 said he recognized after the call ended, the video call's done, that I'm not going to see him again.
Yeah.
And he said, I liked seeing Michael every day.
He did.
I enjoy doing my lessons with Michael every day.
I know.
And he didn't cognitively understand until at that moment, like, that's it. I'll never see him again. And like you said, Michael had built tremendous support with him, was empathic with him, compassionate with him, but firm, and helped him change these skills. And some of the kids say to us, okay, but when I go back home or when I don't have my instructor, what if it all goes away? And like, well, but that's not how the brain works. It's like saying if you learn how to ride a bike and at age 15, you don't have bikes anymore because you're in high school and college, you could pick up a bike when you're 50, 40 years later, 35 years later, and your bike riding skills are still there. A little rusty maybe, but they don't go away. And he understood that, okay, that was a turning point in his life, that this person had with this company, the nowprograms.com, had helped change his life in speaking and in reading and spelling. And I think part of what you described was this recognition that he now lost this support person in his life. And that's, I think, also a testament to the type of people we try to hire, that people have to understand this is not your job. This is a mission to impact as many lives as possible. It's a life-changing generational impact when you change speaking skills, spelling skills, reading skills, comprehension skills. that can have generations of impact going forward.
Yes, you have a believer. And now with the knowledge, seeing that this came from another generation, and we can be there and prepared, Lord willing, if my children have children,
Right.
if it comes up again, we have a resource.
Yep.
And I think we're in line for another go around here.
But it'll be a different technology. And so I'm going to plug it right now and just say, if folks go to lipletterland.com, we've now built an app for 3 to 6 year olds. So if you start seeing your child with the messy eating behaviors at lunch, and they struggle to use their fingers with utensils, then odds are they're going to have some struggle with the mouth as well. We want them to go get that Lip Letterland app, start playing that app with mom and dad, or with one of their siblings, or with their teacher at school, and engage in this interactive play with the app that begins to wire this language processor in that developmental multisensory way that can have a lifetime of impact on early literacy skills and a better foundation. So at most, we hope your kids or grandkids might only need the app.
Yeah, well, there should be early identification now. The nicknames were adorable, and they were a clue. Yeah. The tantrums were not, I'm not going to say my fault, but I didn't carry the brunt of it.
Right.
It was a level of frustration that I couldn't solve, and that was a clue. Those were all clues that I didn't know then, and I know now. Yeah. And this should be built into every March of Dimes screening, every pediatrician screening. There's something around this, every WIC office. I mean, I just think of all the people that I wish they could know these signs and get this early intervention, because it just saves so much. That day I walked in, when I saw you on the program, you're the one thing I circled, like, I am going to this presentation. I knew it was a divine intervention. I had something similar with another child, and it was the same thing. It was like my path got turned left, and I was accepted into that conference, like one out of quite a few. So I really know that it was a divine intervention, that God gave us this gift to work with you, and to have that change for my son that has lasted all these years. Obviously, we're ratcheting up through a brain injury and a more intense demand on the brain. So it's a different season and another opportunity for growth. And I know we have the right person to turn to. I'm so grateful, Dr. Conway. I wish I could talk to every mom and say, please just look at it. Please just look.
We appreciate that, Nancy, because we're typically the parents' last resort. They come to us after they've tried everything else. Like, well, but if you come to us first, you can save a lot of money, can save a lot of headache. We have tremendous credentials, degrees, expertise, published research. We're not an educational entity. We are all brain scientists, healthcare brain scientists, who've put our expertise together to impact language, learning, cognition, and literacy skills in many, many ways. So whether it's someone going to themorriscenter.com, one of our clinics in Jax, Ocala, or the Caribbean, or it's somebody going online with nowprograms.com, which we push out services all over the world, or it's that fun new app, Lip Letterland. We want parents to get the most effective things as soon as possible. And there's many more parents with your stories, but a different story, that we also have them tell the story of how we empowered the 25-year-old. How we empowered the 54-year-old, how we empowered, the 70-year-old. All those are on our YouTube channel. And even my TED Talk, which was the early piece of science it came out in 2015. And that one just also says, hey, in 15 minutes, let me give you a piece of our extensive science we've done to try to help identify early and intervene early. So we thank you for all that support, Nancy, and for your kind words, and for helping tell your story today. So we hope more kids don't struggle, and we hope more parents ask for the research that backs up what somebody's telling you to do. If they don't have the research, then you're playing Russian roulette. You're just guessing. And we don't encourage that in anything to do with your child. Find people who have the data and the research that's published. Don't just let them tell you they have research. Ask to see it, because that makes the bigger difference on what you're going to put your time, your energy, and your resources, which has a bigger impact on what's going to be the outcome for your child. We helped avoid your child struggling to read in the elementary grades. struggling to spell. You know, it's
And the struggles in the family.
Yes.
Supporting a child whose body is physically overwhelmed is energetic and time consuming and a hardship on all the siblings, both parents.
Right.
That was a lot for our family that got resolved at the grace of this program. It did impact him, but it changed the whole family. And thank you.
You're welcome, Nancy. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And for those who watch this as a recorded message, we hope you got the message of dyslexia, dyspraxia. We know how to change those skills. Give us a call. We do free consultations, thousands of them on nowprograms.com online. We do thousands of in-person free consultations at the Morris Center clinics. We are here as a resource to help parents be empowered and help empower your child, your teen, your college student, or your spouse who still can't read well. That's okay. It's not for lack of trying. It's you've not gotten into a program that has the scientific expertise to help change that brain processing. Nancy, we hope to see you again in 5 more years, get another update, and maybe there'll be grandchildren's stories there as well, and lip letter land stories too. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon. We're going to sign off.